Hello, Internet. Good morning. It is Saturday, the 4th of November, and I'm in my mountain hideout where the combined forces of imperialism cannot find me, I hope. So, I'm sharing my hopes and my fears with you again on the matter of Israel-Palestine. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about Netanyahu's efforts to reform the judiciary, which led to mass protests, the biggest that Israel has ever seen, and what these mean in light of the Hamas attacks and what might come out of it. The Netanyahu government's efforts to reform the judiciary are, of course, bullshit. But what they prove is that this government views democracy as an effective obstacle to totalitarian rule. The reforms involve turning the judiciary into a branch of government rather than a branch of civil society, and that branch of government is tasked with doing whatever the government wants them to do. The argument that the electorate have power over the judiciary through their vote is, of course, bullshit. The power to vote in new elected representatives does not imply any power whatsoever to determine policy. That is one of the biggest shortcomings of what we in the West refer to as democracy right now. So this should be self-evident. I'm not exactly clear on when and how the democratic states decided to have an independent judiciary as a complementary to democratic processes. But the idea is that the judiciary have the power to hold government and politicians to certain laws when they attempt to break them or to break their promises to the people who they represent. This would be the case, for example, if the government or political party adopts a law that conflicts with the Constitution or with human rights as defined, for example, by the European Human Rights Declarations, and I don't know what they're called, EHRC. In its efforts to defeat the Palestinians, the Israeli government and the military have set goals that conflict with international agreements on human rights and how to wage war and deal with popular uprisings and so forth. Yet, Israelis only began to protest Netanyahu's attempts to limit the powers of the judiciary when they realized he could use this judiciary not only to legitimize the occupation and oppression of Palestinians, but also to further his attempts to install a right-wing neoliberal government. This type of governmental ideology places profits before people, and it is no surprise that the shift towards neoliberalism that began when Ronald Reagan gained the support of the British Tory party under Margaret Thatcher spawned an endless series of wars for resources and political control. The British invaded the Falklands and began a merciless and brutal war against Argentina, and that has continued until today with embargoes on economies that refuse to capitulate to the neoliberalist agenda, such as Cuba and Venezuela. In other words, these economies cannot be brought under the control of this imperialist cabal against the better interests of ordinary people. And so they are suggested to brutal campaigns. Without a doubt, the Israeli judiciary has been enabling the occupation and the oppression of Palestinians and other minorities in Israel, and helping the government further increase its powers for a very long time. It is only very recently that a very small minority of Israelis have begun to openly talk about the way the occupation which is legitimized by the judiciary, undermines the security of the Israeli state. But their main concern here is self-interest, not empathy for the plight of Palestinians. Predictably, the recent attacks by Hamas have undermined any residual or fledgling sympathy for Palestinians amongst Israelis. The attacks have led to suppression of a potential popular uprising against the Israeli right, led by Netanyahu and other fascists. Whilst I understand and sympathize with the Palestinian cause, and even though I am aware of the absolute powerless state that Gaza has been reduced to by the Israeli siege, I must also acknowledge that these attacks have empowered Netanyahu to move further to the right. That is a dangerous gamble, because whilst this might undermine public support for his government in Israel and around the world, his plight has become more desperate than ever, and God only knows what horrible things he and his cronies might undertake as a consequence. That's it for today. Please like and subscribe to my videos so that I feel I should continue commenting like this. Have a nice day.